Yano ebibrime
Akrofi-Christaller Institute of Theology, Mission and Culture, ACI, is a postgraduate research and training institution that focuses on African Christianity. It was founded in 1987 by Professor Kwame Bediako, who, with others, recognized the shift in the center of gravity of Christianity from Europe and North America to the southern continents, Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the South Pacific. Whereas at the beginning of the 20th century, about 80% of Christians lived in the West, now less than 40% live there, with the 60% and more living in the southern continents. This demographic fact places tremendous responsibility upon the church in Africa and makes African Christianity a field for active study and research so as to equip for more effective mission and ministry. Akrofi-Christaller Institute exists to help the church rise to its responsibilities and meet the challenge. To achieve its objectives, ACI has developed the Master of Arts in Theology and Mission with a number of possible options: Biblical Studies, Pentecostal Studies, Holistic Mission and Development, Leadership, Mother Tongue Theology, and Bible and Science. ACI also offers the Master of Theology program with options in African Christianity and Bible translation and interpretation. Then the Doctor of Philosophy program in Theology focuses on African and world Christianity and Bible translation and interpretation. Christian leadership in Africa and beyond will greatly benefit from the curriculum that enables those eager to equip themselves for mission and ministry to appreciate the realities of the African cultural and religious setting, as well as African Christian experience, and consequently engage more effectively with today's ministry challenges. To support the achievement of these laudable objectives, the Johannes Zimmerman Library is available for the use of students and visiting researchers. It houses about 30,000 volumes of literature and journals specializing in theology and the history of Christianity in Africa. It includes indigenous language materials as well as other special collections in African history, language, and culture. The Johannes Zimmerman Library also has an archive, preserving archival materials of the Basel Mission and the Presbyterian Church of Ghana, as well as other ancient records of Christian history in Ghana. In addition, ACI is a subscriber to several databases, which enable researchers to be truly international in their range of research. The offices and seminar rooms of ACI are housed in the historic Basel House, originally constructed between 1848 and 1860 to accommodate students who were trained to become teacher catechists of the Basel Mission Church and later the Presbyterian Church. Just adjacent to Basel House is the newer Students' Hostel, which has spacious and comfortable accommodation for the many students who prefer to be housed on campus to give undivided attention to their studies. For guests and senior visitors to ACI, the historic Coconut House, also constructed in the 19th century, is available. Adjacent to Coconut House is the cafeteria, which offers full board in a deliciously delightful way. As demonstrated in the early African university, the Museum of Alexandria, eating and theology form a very fruitful pair. Akrofi-Christaller Institute is situated in Akropong-Akuapem, about 50 kilometers from Accra. But the town itself is historic, being the seat of the Akuapem Paramountcy, and is known for its annual Ojura Festival, which continues the heritage of Akuapem religion and culture. Interestingly, ACI students observe this festival with a view to understanding how the religious and cultural aspirations it embodies may be turned to Christ. One of the core values of ACI is excellence, and it seeks to achieve this in all aspects of its life. It is no wonder that it was the first private theological institution to receive a presidential charter to award its own degrees. Again, it is the only theological institution in Ghana to graduate a substantial number of PhDs from across the African continent and beyond, who are now members of its alumni association. Indeed, ACI is an international institution with faculty from 3 continents, and it attracts students from across Africa and around the world, making its community truly international. Come visit us sometime, or better still, join us on campus for an exciting journey into theology and mission studies, all aimed at making the Church of Christ more effective in its ministry.
Let us pray. Our Holy Father, we give you thanks for giving us another opportunity to celebrate the lives and works of three illustrious sons of our nation and your church, David Asante, Theophilus Opoku, and Carl Christian Reindorf. You, God, are invisible. We do not see you, but you reveal your glory to us in human beings. We pray that as we celebrate your sons today, we shall see your glory. We commit this 15th Asante Opoku Reindorf lecture into your hand, praying that it will be a great success. The chairperson and the speaker are in your hands. Guide them by your Spirit, that we may be enabled through this lecture to know you better and serve you and our nation well. We make our prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Chair, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Akrofi-Christaller Institute family, I wish to warmly welcome you to the Asante Opoku Reindorf lecture series, the 15th lecture in the series. We are grateful to once again be working together with the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences to bring you this year's lecture. The three gentlemen that we honor, workers of the Basel Mission from the 19th century, are people who are exemplars of the local contribution to the grounding of the Christian faith in our land. They should inspire us to make our contribution towards making the Christian faith our own in this land and helping others to appreciate the importance of our African heritage when it comes to the Christian faith. We welcome all of you to this lecture. It happens to be online, and therefore we know there are participants from all over the world sharing in this year's lecture. I welcome most especially descendants of these three gentlemen, David Asante, Opoku, and Carl Christian Reindorf. We believe that this year's lecture will inspire all of us to appreciate their contribution to the Christian faith in our land. I hope and pray that every single participant in this year's lecture would be blessed. Once again, you are most warmly welcome. Enjoy the lecture.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in the midst of COVID-19, you should have seen me in my nose mask. That's observing the protocols of COVID-19. That is not so. I have it here, but once I'm keeping the social distancing, I think I would also like to take my liberty by hanging my nose mask whilst I undertake this task. President of the Academy, Vice Presidents of the Academy, past Presidents of the Academy, Fellows of the Academy, Chair, Council, the Akrofi-Christaller Institute of Theology, Mission, and Culture, the Rector, staff, students, alumni, and distinguished invited guests. My task seems to be very simple. It is to introduce to you the chairman of the 15th in the series of the Asante Opoku Reindorf lecture. The chairman for the occasion, a distinguished native of the Garland, Professor Dr. Engineer Henry Ni Ajiri Wellington, FGA, Fellow Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, is a cultural heritage activist, a Bible teacher, and a married man with 3 adult children. And he was elected Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2013 and became the GAS representative on the Architects Registration Board 2019 to 2024. He happens to be a 4th generational offspring of Reverend Theophilus Opoku, the second name in the lecture series for this occasion by virtue of his maternal family heritage. Council members, President of the Academy, students, alumni, distinguished invited guests, join me to humbly invite the chairman of the 15th in the series of the Asante Opoku Reindorf Memorial Lecture, Professor Dr. Engineer Henry Ni Ajiri Wellington, FGA. You are welcome.
I'm highly delighted I can be here to participate in the 15th Asante Opoku Reindorf lectures. Mr. Boache, before I continue, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to you for the very elaborate introduction and kind introduction you've made of me, my own Executive Secretary of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. Thank you very much. I must say that I have accepted wholeheartedly the responsibility to chair this historic 15-lecture series of the Asante Opoku Reindorf Lectures. On this historic occasion, I wish, before I proceed, to gratefully acknowledge the grace of God that has kept us all safe and secured to date and has made it possible for us to gather this afternoon to participate in this lecture, notwithstanding all the limitations and the restraints and the exhibitions put on us by the COVID-19 pandemic. 2 years ago, in this very auditorium in which we are in rest time, I participated in the 13th lecture series, thankfully as a speaker, to address the topic Edinkafo Mo and what are heroes for. It was a great honor for me to execute that responsibility, and I'm forever grateful to the Akrofi-Christaller Institute for the invitation to be the speaker on that occasion. Being a fourth generational offspring of the illustrious Reverend Theophilus Opoku, whose name is in the second in the AOR, I was highly elated to be the speaker to deliver the lecture on that occasion. Today, distinguished audience, real and virtual, this day, dated 23rd October 2020, in the year the earth stood still because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is possible for us to participate again in the program. Hoping that it's going to be a wonderful lecture, I'd like to quickly proceed to introduce the speaker for the day. And it's in the person of a very good friend of mine. His name is Reverend Professor Eric Nibote Anum. He's an authentic Nungwa-born Gan who for a long time now have been domiciled in Ugwa, but is here with us in person. And I'd like to present him to you as the Reverend Professor Eric Bote Anum, who is a pastor of the Presbyterian Church of Ghana and was a lecturer at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana from 2000 to 2019, teaching the New Testament studies, biblical, hermeneutics, and heritage studies. He was promoted to associate professor in 2011 and subsequently to full professor in April 2015, beg your pardon. Professor Anum is the immediate past head of the Department of Religion and Human Values, University of Cape Coast. He is currently the president of the Institute of International Leadership Management and Theology in Accra. Professor Anum received his undergraduate degree at the University of Ghana, Legon, and received his master's and doctorate degrees at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, focusing on biblical studies and specializing in the field of New Testament. Professor Anum worked as a lecturer at the Christian Service University College from 1980 to 1989. He was engaged later on as a research officer at Akrofi-Christaller Institute, Akropon-Ekwapim, from 1989 to 1992. He is interested in intercultural hermeneutics and was one of the coordinators of an international project implemented in 2001 to 2014 called Through the Eyes of the Another, Intercultural Reading of the Bible. The experience of this project he did has informed the content and the essence of his presentation this afternoon. So, distinguished audience, I want to present to you Reverend Professor Eric Nibote Anum. Welcome him with a clap. Thank you very much.
President of the Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Executive Secretary of the Academy of Arts and Sciences, Rector of the Akrofi-Christaller Memorial Center, Prof Chair, invited guests, people watching us from wherever they are watching us, ladies and gentlemen. It's a good pleasure for me to be given the opportunity to deliver the Asante, Opoku, and Reindorf lecture, the 15th edition. Now, I would want to speak briefly about the three illustrious missionaries and servants of the church in whose honor this lecture is being organized. Starting from David Asante. In the words of Ofosu Appiah, Asante produced several books in Twi, among which were the translations of the Pilgrim's Progress and of a book on ancient hedonism in Germany and of the German history. He also wrote a Twi hymn, coined new Twi words, and contributed to the establishment of Twi as a literary language. You go to Theophilus Opoku. Iheanacho identified Opoku's work as basically in the areas of reaching out through open-air evangelism, nurturing and initiating church members into the church through preparation for baptism, mission to heathen people, and also reaching out to traditional priests and Muslims. He also helped in building a lot of structures for the church. In the words of Iheanacho, Opoku left a legacy of consistent Christian witness, which involved his effective use of the Twi language, particularly the Twi Bible. Karl Reindorf, whose story is very close to my topic today, is slightly different from the two gentlemen. And I find a very close linkage between him and the one I'm going to talk about today. He was born at Prampram, east of Accra, in 1834, to Karl Hardenberg Reindorf, a Danish soldier, and Anua Kujo, a Gan woman from the Asren district of Accra. He was a product of the Castle School and also of the Osu and Akropon seminaries. He was a man of many parts, a teacher, a musician,
a soldier, a historian, a medical officer, and also a slave owner. Mr. Chairman, this now moves me to the main person who I will talk about. I'm going to use this person to address my topic. And my topic is simple: verbal reception history of the Bible among indigenous people of Africa. Verbal reception history of the Bible among indigenous people of Africa. The man who I will actually focus on in this lecture is called Jacobus Capitein. That is my main person. And as I said, he has a very close resemblance to Karl Reindorf, because both of them had Danish fathers and they have Ga mothers. And they actually qualify in the area of the category of people who are normally called mulattoes. Like Reindorf, he started from the castle schools since he was a mulatto. And their training involves recitation of Bible passages, repetition of Bible passages, and they went into theology, they went into Greek, and they actually reimagined the Christian faith as they go out to reach out to others. Now, looking at the verbal reception history of the Bible among indigenous people of Africa, it takes us to when the Bible was introduced to Africans. As Desmond Tutu has famously observed, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible, we had the land. They said, "Let us pray." We closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land. The same statement has been rephrased in a more profound way by Mofokeng of South Africa, as in, when the white man came to our country, he had the Bible and we blacks had the land. The white man said to us, "Let us pray." After the prayer, the white man had the land and we blacks had the Bible. According to Gerard West, in a direct response to the anecdote already recounted above about Bibles, white men, and African land, Mofokeng asserts that this story expresses more precisely in the history of political science or Christian missions the ambiguity of the Bible and the dilemma that confronts black South Africans, and for that matter, all Africans, in their relationships with the Bible. In such a situation, generally in Africa, what is considered to be the right interpretative principles and application of the scriptures is not what is popularly at work in most churches and Christian organizations in Africa. And yet, we use the Bible massively. In this situation, should we flow with the popular usages of the Bible or stick to the biblical interpretative principles? One of the options that I felt perhaps will help us to fully appreciate African obsession and possession of the Bible is the reception history of the Bible in Africa. And that is what my paper actually focuses on. And my motivation for this paper, Mr. Chairperson, is when I was asked by Goethe in Germany to write a one-page encyclopedia to be used for indigenous reception histories. And I was specifically to write on the Bible among the indigenous peoples of Africa. And when I wrote that one-page paper, not long after that, I was invited to the University of Leuven at a conference on reimagining humanity. And I was asked to give a paper on the topic, the folkloric reception of the Bible among the indigenous people of Africa. Mr. Chairman, today's lecture is a development of that particular paper which I developed and I gave at Louvain. You will notice that there's the idea of folkloric interpretation and folkloric reception. Talking about folklore, for instance, in most African folklore, we notice that the Bible was used as a magical object for divination. Folklore has it that Africans put a key in it. Two people each hold an end of the key, and they believe that if the culprit touches the Bible, the book turns round the key. This is done normally to single out an evildoer. That is one of the usages of the Bible in earlier life when it came to us. According to J.S. Poby, this points us to the view that in Africa, the Bible is not just a holy book, but that it contains power. For the same reason, people have been known to keep it under their pillows to protect them against witchcraft. Also, Mr. Chairman, we are not the only ones that have these issues. When you go as far as the West Indies, as stated by Sensbach in his book Rebecca's Revival, Creating Black Christianity in the Atlantic World, which was as far away as St. Thomas, he remarked that the Bible was a coded incantation, a talisman for action. Women used it to declare their own value, some fearlessly spitting verses like magic words from it. Mr. Chairman, another Moravian who works in the West Indies, among the plantations, also said, his name was Frederick Martin. He said that there was a link between literature and religion when you look at the message of the Bible. So for him, you cannot talk about the Bible without talking about the literature that is developed among the people that they worked into. Throughout the work of the Moravians among the planters in the West Indies in the 16th and 17th century, it has been said that learning to read was like cracking the mysterious code that will surrender the knowledge and power Europeans had to enslave them. The Moravian brethren went there specifically to use the Bible to enlighten the blacks through literacy classes, since they were operating during the period of the Enlightenment. Martin, who I mentioned earlier on, who was a Moravian missionary working in St. Thomas, specifically said that Bibles should be made available to the slaves on that particular plantations that they work with. But slave owners were not so happy with it because they felt that it was creating some kind of equality between them and the slaves who worked for them. So, among the listeners of Martin at St. Thomas in the West Indies, the Bible was regarded as a magical formulary for Africans who were on these farms. It was a book that has all the rituals for re-envisioning and transforming history and culture. When you go to South Africa, Mr. Chairman, the same thing is operating, not only in the West Indies and not only in other parts of Africa. In the South Africa, you also have the Tilapian Indigenous who received the Bible from missionaries during the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. And they say, The Tilapians who looked at the Bible, this is what they said. In assessing the power of the Bible, the Tilapians were able to identify the shortcomings. For instance, one of their traditional healers pointed this out when he stated, he did not need instructions from anyone, for the dice or bola which hung from his neck informed him of everything that happened at a distance, and added, if they were to attend to instructions, they would not have time to hunt or to do anything. So, for them, the Bible has power and gives direction. But because they also have talismans, they feel perhaps there was no need for the Bible. On the other hand, earlier, there was another Tilapian person who came out to listen to the stories and origins of circumcision and other things from the missionary called John Campbell. And he says, if they should be taught to understand, then the understanding will come from listening to the white missionaries who were actually explaining the Bible to them. But they also recognized, according to the Tilapian, the potential power of books, particularly that book, that is the Bible. So exchange was, they actually thinking that the Bible can be used as a power issue. And once they get it, it's almost like a gun, which they can use to also shoot. At that time, according to West, the gun was more of a priority than the Bible, even though they were seeing it as powerful, but the gun was more seen as more powerful. Among the Tilapian, they felt that they needed power from the book, but they also felt that they need power from their traditional leaders, and they also need power from the gun, because they realized that the colonial people were reading the Bible, and yet they were using the guns to shoot them. Hence, according to West, colonialism not only created the conditions for a different kind of struggle, it also partially provided the resources in the guise of reading and translation. This indicates that, Mr. Chairman, the introduction of the untranslated Bible or untranslated closed Bible to the African was marked by their recognition of it as an object of power that should be exchanged by all means because of its perceived usefulness. When it was opened through reading and writing, it maintained its potency as an instrument of status and position. The Bible was used by both the whites as an instrument of power, because those who came had power to be able to work here and to interact with them and to instruct them. But the Bible was used both as a closed object of power, and most times it was not opened. As a closed object, the Bible could be used by someone who controlled it to compel others to speak the truth, just like the key in the Bible issue, or do their bidding, just like the slave masters on the plantations that we saw. As an opened object, the Bible contained knowledge that was of use in a context of contestation. The Bible seems to share weapons like the sword and the pistol, because those who brought it brought confusing messages. This article focuses on recollection of the perception of the Bible during the Danish occupation of the coastal towns of Accra, which was part of the Guinea coast in Africa in the 1700s and beyond. In other words, now, historically, how did these perceptions of the Bible play out in the 18th century in the Gold Coast? We have seen that it is seen as a book for divination, a book for power, and a book that can be exchanged. With regard to guns, Wolf commented over time that the blacks did not like the cannons, since they believe that the devil himself rushes out of them. They say it is an evil la, which is fire in Ga, and no nu or water can extinguish it. This indicates the demonizing of guns and cannons that were used to kill so many blacks during the military campaigns of the Europeans. So this gave way to serious consideration of Christianity as issues concerning poverty, peace, and other troubles of life confronted them. This state of affairs is summarized in the following quotation of two men who comes from Accra. One said, "Our forefathers worshipped the fetish, that is traditional deities, and were well practiced with charm affairs, and they came no riches nor peace into their lives. Therefore, if we, the children, will continue on the same way, we shall also share the same troubles and dangers in life as our forefathers." However, Ghana folklore about the perception of the Bible in Morat's work says, in the beginning, so they believed, this is the folklore, that God, which is they called Nyongba, or but they wanted to say Nyongba, created many black and white people, the former first and the latter last. He then brought forth two covered gifts of different sizes and allowed the blacks to choose first. However, the blacks, when they were asked to choose first, it is said that the black rather chose the bigger one, and what the blacks chose was the fetish and the worshipping of other gods. According to him, the blacks greedily chose the largest gifts, which contained things needed to worship the fetishes and the necessities of this life. The gift which fell to the whites contained books and the sources of everything by which the Europeans distinguished themselves from the Negroes. Furthermore, in response to the Basel missionaries preaching on the streets of Usu, a remark made in the Ghana language was that Nyongmosanehi, she wanyan wa phone ni wa chemele fe shiwole. Which means that God's palaver is good, but we cannot give up doing what our forefathers had done and felt and left for us. Engman also said, this gives additional reason for not accepting the Bible easily because of the religious heritage of the Ghanaians in Osu, which they wish to protect and maintain by all means. However, the difference in whites being seen as people of the book and Africans being seen as people of worshipping other deities did not actually create a problem. Ghanaians would happily think that it is good to practice Ghana traditional religions and worship the gods. And then book can be used as a symbol. And I keep coming to the closed Bible. I'll come back to it. And this is what Morat said. Ghanaians assume that the diseased Negroes become as wise, thus by just opening a book and reading it, and then going back to do their traditional things. They become as wise as white people if they only open the Bible at funerals and then they just sing their own songs from it. So you see the kind of thing. In this context, books were associated with Europeans, indigenous customs were associated with Africans, but they can cross over and take the books and read. Interestingly, from the start, instructions through books, which we said the native Ghanaians were not privy to, which included learning to read and write Danish, and going through Christian rites like baptism, were confined to mulattoes. This was because there were clearly marked out boundaries between the native Ghanaians and the Euro-Africans, who were the mulattoes like Reindorf and Prof. Those who had Ghanaian motherhood and then Danish fatherhood were those who were to be taught books. And I think this was really emphasized because they wanted to mark the boundaries that natives should not be taught the Bible, those who should be taught the Bible should be those who were mulattoes. For this reason, chaplains were appointed to do the job of teaching in the castle at Osu on behalf of the Danish establishment, which became known as the Castle School. This is evident in Karl Reindorf himself, a mulatto's statement concerning himself, stating, "I should have become a priest either of Nayo at Accra or Clote at Christianborg if I had not been born a mulatto and become a Christian." In other words, if he had not been a mulatto, he would have been a devotee of the shrine of Nayo or of Clote. And there's even a story that says that Reindorf himself was protected in his early life by a fetish called Digbla. And he actually escaped when he was a boy from there to go to school. So there's all this. So this meant, as I said, the lines were drawn between the natives and the mulattoes. So as far as religious practices were concerned, the mulattoes were to go through it, but Africans should not be given the opportunity to become a part of it. So from the start, instructions through books did not include the Africans. And as somebody has said, those who were actually working in the castles, who were teaching in the castles, were actually not there as missionaries. They were just there to train the mulatto children on behalf of the Danish traders. Witness says, as far as I have been able to discover, it has never been the contract that when you are appointed a chaplain, you should actually embark on actually trying to reach out to the others who were outside of the castle. Because the Danish authorities frowned on such a move, especially if the chaplain made an attempt to move out of the castle to the native domain. Now, regarding the reception of the Bible, the mulattoes were very instrumental in the Ghana area through their school in the Inusu Christianborg Castle. The familiar Danish names known today as street names belong to the seedlings that sprouted. Against all odds, they survived to become the ancestors of family trees that characterized the Danish Osu landscape. For this article, I'll single out Christian Jacobus Capitein. Christian Jacob Capitein, who calls himself Niteku Brofonyo B. He was one of the mulattoes whose contribution is phenomenal. Jacobus Capitein, a mulatto, was sent to Denmark to be trained as a blacksmith, to come back, in the words of the book that I read, which was written by Prof. Wellington, to assist with the Royal Danish Africa Company's work on the Guinea coast in 1726. But over there, he went through many experiences, including his meeting with Zinzendorf, who recognized Capitein's potential as a missionary to Africa, which led to his linkage with a move to join the Moravians at Herrnhut in Germany, where he learned German. But his experience in Herrnhut is summarized as follows. He was attracted by the Moravians' evangelical devotion and simple lifestyle, but as he hinted, he had every reason to believe that he was not entirely welcome. For all their professions of spirituality, equality among the godly, the white brethren regarded him as different, not quite them. They called him Africanish, wild, an African savage, and Moorish. And Moorish is Moor, which is used to describe anyone who is not a kind of a white person. They referred to the Asians and everybody as Moor, which is a very derogative term at that time. As rightly put, Christian Capitein struggled consistently to reconcile his African and European identities. In all his passages between Denmark, Germany, and the Gold Coast, he never felt fully accepted in any place or among any group of people. The difficulties he had in Herrenhout caused him to feel that he would be better off in Africa, working among his own types, mulattoes in Ghana, because he sees himself as Niteku Blofonyobi. Zinzendorf himself, the one who took him from Copenhagen to Germany in Herrenhout, who was the leader of the Herrenhout Moravian community, had difficulties with him. And so released him to come back to Elmina. Here he did not have much success, so he relocated to the Christianburg. And then he was recalled back to Germany by Zinzendorf, because Zinzendorf felt that the 4 years that he stayed, 1937 to 1941, he did not do much work. Protein returned to Christiansburg after getting married to Rebecca, who is coincidentally from St. Thomas, where when I started, I talked about their reception of the Bible, which looks very close to our African magical reception. That is where Rebecca comes from. But when he went back, he got married to Rebecca, who had been a widow after some time. Here, he began serious study of African spirituality, comparatively observing and describing the hierarchy of African divinities in different cultures, from the supreme god to several lesser national deities. When he came back, when he got married there, but when he came back to Christianburg, of course, Zinzendorf called him back. He got married. Afterwards, he said he belonged to Africa, so he wanted to come back. But they were not too sure that at that time that Niteku Afrikaners can take care of Rebecca well. So they asked Rebecca to stay, and then they actually asked him to go back to Africa. And that is where, when he came, he took time to study the traditional religions and things. This time round, when he came back, having gone round and have had a lot of identity crisis, Protein found members of his Ghanaian family, many of them who were still living, went to their villages and visited them. His uncle Ashangbo was even said to be a traditional chief at a place called Little Popo. He went there to see him. He was so interested in his African heritage this time round. He visited his relatives as far as Cape Coast. And there was one of his relatives called Tete, and Tete was in Teshi. So he remarked that he has now known his own uncle, who is Tete. He says, Tete from the Teshi region was a blood relative of mine and fairly close by, very pious and a genuine person, better than I. Unquote. So Sensbach commented that it is not certain how warmly his relatives welcomed him, but they might have seen him as a valuable multilingual go-between, and he was eager to claim connections with them. So coming back, there was that. Unfortunately, this journey was also cut short when he accidentally shot and killed a mulatto student in 1661. He was then put in jail, and after some time, he actually appealed to Frederick V, who is the king of Denmark. In their days, if you do something here and you are a Danish person, and it is under the auspices of the Danish trading company, it goes to Denmark, and then the king will have to rule. The king looked at the case, and he actually exonerated him. He said he should be released from prison. After he's been exonerated, Christian was then a little helpless, but he felt ashamed, and he didn't want to remain with the mulattoes. The people you're going to teach, you have shot one of them, you've killed, and now the king in Denmark says you are free. So he couldn't go back. So then He returned to Denmark in 1762. But then when he got there, he was so broke. And he wanted to go to the wife. The wife is in Germany, in Herrenhut. And he did not have any money. So he walked 300 miles. He walked 300 miles just to go and join the wife. The wife, Rebecca, was very happy. Rebecca went back to Herrenhut, and so they saw Protein as the prodigal son who has come home. So then the problem is, what next? In October 1762, Protein wrote a letter to Frederick V, asking to be reinstated so that he could go back to Christianborg. For him, that is where his heritage is. He's been traveling around Germany, going to other places, but he sees he wants to. And this is what he wrote. And I was sharing it with the chairman. He says, I'm resolved to visit my fatherland, Guinea again, to serve God and my fellow men by bringing information and instruction to the poor, largely forsaking mulatto children, unquote. Even though his mother rather was a Ghanaian, he says he's going to his fatherland, which is very interesting. And his fatherland now is the Gold Coast. The time it came round, it was agreed. This time round, he was to come with Rebecca. So he came to, this time coming back, he came with Rebecca. After years away, Rebecca, now a sold slave, is now coming home with a mulatto husband to the place where they were sold. So in 1764, they came to Denmark from Herrenhut, which is Germany. They now came to Denmark, Copenhagen, to ask for help from the king to travel back to Africa. Protein was now back to where he started. You know, when Protein as a young person was sent to go and learn blacksmith, and he decided he won't learn blacksmith. Now, this journey had brought him back to the same place. Now, they struggled in 1760s, they struggled to get money to go. But actually, because the church was not helping, it was still the king who gave him support. And when he realized the king was going to give him support, this is where the reception of the Bible became very crucial. To confirm his own value and to thank the king, he wrote and submitted a manuscript that was published in Copenhagen in 1764 with the Danish title, A Useful Grammatical Introduction to Two Hitherto Unknown Languages, Fanti and Accra. So this, which he wrote, and this is described as a major work of scholarship that Protein must have partly drafted or made notes, maybe when he was in Christianborg. And this book was finalized because he wants to actually show gratitude to the king. He had bits and pieces of this, but he decided that he would read it. And he wrote a 64-page book, which he actually did in honor of Frederick V. So the 64-page text in Danish also provides a basic vocabulary, an overview of Ga and Fanti grammatical structure, and translations of key biblical texts such as the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, Luther's Catechism, and the Sacrament of Baptism. Though his orthography is now obsolete, Protein established himself in his time as the pioneer in the exceptionally difficult task of translating European and African language into each other. Kwame Napo confirms this fact by saying that in Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast, the first translations of biblical texts began when Africans such as Jacobus Capitein and Christian Protein, both of whom had been linguistically and theologically trained in Europe, returned to Ghana to work as chaplains and educators in slave forts. These men translated catechetical materials, including some Bible texts, to the biracial children of African women and European traders and soldiers they also taught. And they also taught traditional chiefs and others. So Protein, armed with these 64, which he was coming to Africa to teach, armed with it, and with other things they were able to put together, he and his wife Rebecca set sail from Denmark, Copenhagen, to Christianborg, Osu. But when the Protestants disembarked and tried to land, they fell victim to a violent surf. Their canoe lost control and capsized. Although they were rescued and taken to the fort, they lost their belongings in the ocean, including Christian Protestants' papers. The manuscript gone. If he had not actually dedicated some to this thing, it would not have been seen. Courtesy Henroots and courtesy our chairperson, this is the copy of the manuscript of the Lord's Prayer. I selected that one from the manuscript because for me, myself, it is the Lord's Prayer that I learned first. I learned the Lord's Prayer first in Adangbe when I was about 5-6 years, and my father was in Adan, a village called Pute near Adanfo, and I learned the Lord's Prayer, and that was my prayer for a long time. When I came back to Nungwa and we were going to eat, they asked me to pray. I just prayed in Adangbe, and it was the Lord's Prayer. And for so many periods in my life, it was only the Lord's Prayer in Adangbe, which was my prayer. When I'm going to sleep, I pray it. And I wake up, I pray it. So for me, it's very crucial to me. So this is the manuscript. And because of my own journey as a Christian and its relationship with the Lord's Prayer, when I got the manuscript and I realized it was obsolete, I decided that I'll transcribe it. So I spent time to look at it and transcribed it so that it will come into contemporary Ghana, so that others would understand what this man, Protein, was thinking of. When you read it, you will not understand what he's saying. But if you go behind it, you understand what he's saying. Because he's trying hard, putting whatever he has known in Osu together far away in Denmark when he has gone through so many experiences. And he says things like, Vokiabo Nija, GJ Niabo Mini. You look at it and you want to look at what he's saying. You look at it and you say, Wacheniyo Nyongbo Mi. That's what he wants to say. Our Father who lives in God. And I think these are the understandings that people have. Ha guy afe merete. Hani ogbe he merete. Merete means achi. And he was trying to say, Hani ogbe he achi. Let your name be held in purity. Javo nja how geni abba. And then you say, honey, geni, you realize it's like hini. And you know, he also worked at Elmina. And he knows hini. So he says geni, and you realize that geni here is actually, he's saying, let your kingdom come. Geni here means heni or manche, which is your kingdom. Hani usma afe ja. Hani afe osomonani nija. So there I said, not only osomonani, but osomonani nija. Which means that we should actually do the will of God, which is righteous. And for me, it is very, very interesting. And he says, Shupang tan macha ja niam bumini. And I translated it. Ye shikpon tamoboni afio ye mwenle. So you realize here he is actually combining so many things. So, when we see language, it has gone through struggles. Oh, look at how somebody is struggling. Ha va miande va bafa abolo. Just to say, give us this day our daily bread. You see how where it has gone. How many wadang befang abolo. So you see, I found it very interesting. Ka ohien afa wa nishai. Hani ohien akpa wa nishai ani. Allow yourself to forget our wrongdoings. Tamo achia wo va ha efa. Tamo boni wo hu wo kefa. Just as we also forgive. Kaha va nia ja kawamini. Kewo akaya kai ami. Don't lead us into temptation. Shi je movo je nia shani. Shi je mo keje eshami. Take us out of these rotten situations. Nuni Kie abankro ahu. And here you see him combining both Akan and Gan. Nuni is like Tumi, and it is Hewale. No, Ji Hewale. And abankro is about what? Anunyam. So, Onoji Hewale. Anunyam. Oh, Nyambo, Femo no da. Oh, Nyombo, Femo no da. Oh God, do this for us always. This is Protein's Lord's Prayer. Isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful how he translated it. A plate of this has come to us, and when you look at it, you realize that Protein, who has studied the gospel, this is a combination of the Gospel of Matthew 6:9-13 and Luke 11:2-4. And it comes out clearly that Protein has produced it in line with a German translation that blends the Matthean and Lucan versions together. However, it is also evident that Matthew was used as the base text. This text seems adequate to give Gans in their context a perspective of God in addition to what they already knew. In addition to what they already knew. And the reception of the Bible actually took place in a very remarkable occasion. And that I told you from the start that when Protein came, he lost everything. But when he came and was about to arrive, he has told Tete Intention, all his relatives, Ashangbo, from Little Popo and others, they all came to welcome him. And at that time, Protein has lost everything, including the document he was coming to use to teach. So when Protein came from the ship, his relatives gathered together with him and they came home. When they came home, they went and took their bottles of traditional liquor to pour libation. And he said to them, please, this time round, this is the moment of the reception of the Bible. This time round, he just told them, please, I know you are interested in these traditional gods. And I know you believe in them. But me, Niteku, Prof, I've gone round. Jacob, I've gone round. And I've known another way of doing libation. And this way of doing libation is the same as yours. The only difference is that my libation prayer tablet is different from your prayer tablets. The prayers I'm going to say goes to the same God as yours. So they gave him the opportunity. And Jacob, Africanus, Christian, Protein, in amazement and at the watch of his own relatives, prayed the Lord's Prayer that we have just gone through. That was the period of the reception of the Bible. And after that incident, when the Bible was received by them, in terms of the Lord's Prayer, they were so happy, they embraced him, and they really enjoyed having him back to join them, this time round, giving them the Bible. And from that time on, as the Bible developed around Osu, as the Bible developed around the Ghana areas, people continued his work to continue retranslating the Bible from the Lord's Prayer to the other things for a whole period. And talking to our chairman, Prof. Wellington, at the time, during his days, the Bible was still used as a closed document. It was put on the pillows. And because it was put on the pillows, people sometimes believe that it is magical. It is so magical that you put the Bible under your pillow, and when you put it under your pillow, all the evils and all the things that you want would go away. And I want to say that in that respect, we realize that three things comes to my mind. The recitation of the Bible. Because this time round, Protein has lost the document. The repetition of the Bible and the reimagination. I think he has to reimagine what the Lord's Prayer is, that when he wrote it. And I believe that is what he actually had to do. And it is very important for us to realize that in our time, in these days, where the Bible is still seen as a closed document, where people say Bible say and they don't even know where it is, where most people would not want to study the Bible even when they have it. Protein has taught us that it is very important for us to live not only using the Bible as it was brought to us, as a magical instrument. In these days of deliverance, using the prayer more and not using the Bible. In these days where it is not fashionable to study the Bible, I want to present to you both the folkloric reception of the Bible and also the oral reception of the Bible, which was through reciting it, repeating it, and reimagining it. And once these things are done, you can see that the Bible comes alive. The one who wrote it says, when he finished actually reciting the Lord's Prayer, the faces of his relatives really glowed, and they were so happy to receive it. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope that as we read from Protein, we would see that it has been so challenging for people to use so many years to produce the Bible. And now that we have it, we should see it as a document of life. Thank you very much.
Distinguished audience, both real and virtual. So soon we've come to the end of such a wonderful, fascinating, and exciting lecture. You will no doubt agree with me that it has been a tremendous piece of presentation from Reverend Professor Eric Anum. I will not make any attempt at all to summarize this very fascinating lecture. I was making copious notes because the information Professor Anum was presenting was so enthralling to me, and I wanted to do further work on this because the character he used to demonstrate the folkloric and vocal reception of the Bible among the indigenous people have been a person who has really inspired me as I've gone back to study the life of this person, Jacob Christian Africanus Protein. So I would like to say to Professor Eric Anum, thank you so much for this very illuminating lecture, which has given us a very good impression of the reception of the Bible among the Gans and the people of the Gold Coast at that time. This attitude of the people to receive the Bible not only as a piece of spiritual material, but also as an artifact which had mystical powers. I think it's very interesting indeed. And I'm very grateful that the detailed presentation Professor Anum has made of protein has really convinced me that indeed protein in his time was a great African who embraced the gospel of Jesus Christ. As one theologian has said, the translation of the Lord's Prayer in Ghana as attempted by Protein had a very profound meaning, an indication of his reception of the Bible. His translation of our Father in heaven as not as our Father in heaven, but as our Father in God. It's very profound indeed, because the heaven is a place which is in God, because the heaven of heavens cannot contain God. So logically, from Protein's perspective, our Father, whom we relate to through Jesus Christ, is all in all. So, Reverend Professor Anum, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, which has thrown a lot of light on our forebears' reception of the Bible in their culture. Thank you very much, audience, for paying attention to this brilliant presentation. We also want to thank the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, which has given us the opportunity to have this wonderful presentation taking place in the auditorium of the Academy of Arts and Sciences. We are also very grateful to the Akrofi-Christaller Institute for making it possible for this presentation to come on, notwithstanding the challenges we have had in preparing towards it. And we are grateful to God that, yes, indeed, notwithstanding the COVID-19 limitations, we have been able to have this presentation both in reality and also virtual. To bring this afternoon's presentation and event to closure, we are very grateful to the moderator of the Presbyterian Church of Ghana, Reverend Professor J.O. Mante, to give us the benediction. So we want to wait for him to give us the benediction. Thank you.
Now, unto God's gracious mercies and protection, we commit ourselves. Unto God's gracious mercies and protection, I commit all of you. Brethren, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord God of Israel lift up the light of his countenance upon all of us and give us his peace, his real shalom, even now and evermore. Amen.
Amen.